Well, so much stuff happened yesterday. You're getting an extra video, so enjoy. I've talked about time bits and pieces, but never. Well, we have done dedicated videos to this on the channel, but we've talked about it here and there, especially on our good morning walks, about the very, very controversial elections bill that was going through the House of Commons into the House of Lords yesterday. And unfortunately, I was hoping that the Lords would stop it, but unfortunately, that bill has now passed. And that elections bill has some very, very worrying consequences for, well, essentially not our integrity, but as we are going to hear, this is how countries slide into authoritarianism. Because the election bill basically gives the power for Boris Johnson or whoever might be the prime minister to call an election whenever they want. And one of the justifications that many of the Tory MPs used for passing this bill or voting for it was when we saw the big crises around Brexit in 2017, 2018, Theresa May constantly tried to push for another general election because she didn't have the majority to be able to get her bill through. Now, of course, you shouldn't just immediately go, I'm just going to push as hard as we possibly can, to get an election just so I can have a majority. That's not how, a functioning democracy should really work. You should maybe think about compromise at that point. But of course, that wasn't going to happen because, again, the hardcore Brexiteers were pushing and pushing and pushing. Of course, we also saw Theresa May saying, I'm not going to hold a snap general election. And obviously, she went for a snap general election because she saw the polls and saw how big a majority she could get if those polls were accurate and true. But of course, they didn't turn out that way. Again, the so-called Brexit election didn't turn out to be a Brexit election. Just goes to show you how sometimes whenever you have a general election, people that think that might be a big issue in that general election don't tend to be. That general election was all about pensions, surprisingly enough or not, and especially the heating allowance. That's what was the big thing in that general election, not Brexit. But not only that, it also gives essentially the government control over the Electoral Commission, basically removing their independence. This means that any future government could very well invalidate, interfere, or even rig elections in their favour. This is very, very, very worrying, and it's something that we should really seriously be concerned about. And if you are for electoral reform, as bad as this bill is, this is a fantastic rallying call to reform our electoral system and once again give the Electoral Commission independence, because there is no good reason why the Electoral Commission should be controlled by that government, any government, whether it be, Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, coalition, whatever. It should always be an independent body. And like I say, the argument to make it, independent once again is there. And it, again, provides a fantastic opportunity for us to go forward with that rallying cry at the next general election. So let's go diving into just what happened yesterday, and of course some of the more very worrying consequences of this elections bill. So before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. So on we go. This comes from the London Economic with the title, "A Dark Day. Electoral Commission concerned as Tories pass controversial bill." The Electoral Commission has admitted it is concerned about its independence after the government passed a new law to place it under ministerial control. Changes to the election bill, which passed the House of Lords on Wednesday night, which had the government's significant powers directly to the election's watchdog priorities. Critics say that the changes represent a grave threat to the free and fair elections and amount to an authoritarian power grab that will let ministers shape how electoral law applies to political opponents and their own party. So this, of course, is very, very bad. The last thing you want is them being able to apply how electoral law applies to not only their opponents, but their own party. This is bad. This is very, very bad. And one of the things, of course, you get Tories saying, we'd never do such a thing like that. But remember, when Viktor Orban first came in Hungary, did something sort of very similar to gain control. And he said, I'd never do something like that. He went on to do exactly that. So we really have to be concerned what they do now that they have this power, and be ringing the alarm bells if they do something like that. So under this legislation, the Secretary of State will be able to issue a statement of purpose that directs the Commission's priorities. It will also automatically add a government minister to the committee that oversees and scrutinizes the work of the Commission. Peers that deferred the law on Monday, but it was sent back to the upper house just 2 days later, reportedly catching opposition parties off guard. Just 67 Labour peers actually turned up to vote on measure, alongside 70 Lib Dems and 33 crossbenchers, and just 3 rebel Tories. Responding to the vote, a spokesperson for the Electoral Commission told The Independent, as the political finance regulator and the body which oversees free and fair elections, the way in which we work and our decisions must remain independent. This underpins fairness and trust in the electoral system, as well as public and cross-party confidence in the Commission. We remain very concerned about the potential impact of these measures and look to the very formal consultation on the government's proposed statement once it is available. All parties have stated during the parliamentary consideration for the electoral election bill that the independence of the Electoral Commission is vital to the functioning of a healthy democracy. The Commission will continue to act as an independent body and impartial in any other way to help maintain public confidence in elections across the UK. Naomi Smith, the chief executive of the campaign group Best for Britain, said that last night was the last chance to protect the independence of the election watchdog and to win it in free and fair elections in the UK. Despite enormous efforts and cross-party cooperation and resistance to the government's authoritarian power grab, tonight's Johnson regimes succeeded in its latest pursuit to pursue very dodgy accountability. There is now an urgent need to remove this government and undo the damage that they have wrought on our institutions and public trust in politics. Opposition parties must work together to make this a reality. Kay Taylor, the director of the campaign group Fair Vote UK, said the government had voted to officially end the independence of the Election Commission, and that the new powers mean that ministers can effectively rig election rules in their favour. This is how countries slide into authoritarianism, he said. First, you take control of the institutions, then you rig them in your favour and ban noisy protests so that people can't fight back. It's a dark day for democracy. And that is very, very concerning. And I just want to go back to that part here about how this bill caught the way in which this was passed. This was done very, very sneaky. Again, I just want to read that. So the law was defeated on Monday. That was it. I thought this was clear, that this was dead. But again, it was sent back to the upper house just 2 days later, and it caught all the peers and opposition parties completely off guard. So that this was done in a very, very sneaky way. This wasn't done in a fair way, saying, oh, hey, this bill's going back to the House of Lords. They snuck it back as quietly as possible so that the peers and the other people weren't prepared for it. But of course, this is one thing we've said about the House of Lords before. It needs desperate reform because this is what they can do. Because again, whereas in the House of Commons, ministers are pretty much required to be there almost 24/7, except for Thursday and Friday, where they go back to the constituencies and have their own constituency days. But then, of course, MPs are sat there and have what are called, vote tallies. So you might have a Labour MP that has 10 votes from his surrounding constituency, and then they take it in turns to rotate, so that if there does a vote or a crucial vote does come up on like the Thursday or the Friday that they need to vote on, then they are there with those 10 votes to do that. That doesn't so much happen in the House of Lords. There is no rule for that. Ministers, the Lords have to be there. And of course, if you sneak a rule like they have done with this, the elections bill, back in very quickly, then you can pass it with almost next to no opposition. So this was passed in such a very sneaky way and a very dishonest way, when the bill had already been defeated, but then was, well, snuck back very quickly and quietly, in such a way that caught all the peers and other parties off guard. And don't make this wrong. They will do this again. If they've shown that it works one way, and if they're being defeated by the Lords time and time again, well, they'll just sneak it back into the Lords as quietly as possibly they can, so there's very little time for their opposition Lords who might rally to block certain parts of that bill again. So this, again, is a reason why not only do we need to get rid of them, reform, put the Electoral Commission back to the way it was, securing its independence, but also not only reform the House of Commons, how they are voted in, but also the Lords as well. We need a complete change top to bottom. And as I've said before, a vote for mass change like that would be a massive vote winner for political party, for the Labour Party, if they do it. And we are at that point now where I think we are going to see that. But if we do come to a general election, then I would love to see a coalition form around that basis to support getting that mass electoral change through. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a web donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.